Have you ever wondered why some women seem to linger in a man's mind like a forbidden dream he cannot wake from? Why her presence feels less like company and more like a haunting? An echo that bends his will, alters his choices, and turns him restless with desire. Carl Jung once suggested that the feminine carries archetypal power that pierces far deeper than physical attraction. It is not the body alone that enslaves a man. It is the invisible, ungraspable energy she embodies, the mystery he cannot decode, the mirror he both fears and craves. This is why certain women become addictions in the male psyche. They are not simply lovers, they are thresholds. When a man encounters such a woman, something ancient stirs inside him. His ego wants possession, but his unconscious senses danger because she represents not merely a person, but a reflection of his anima, the inner feminine he has repressed, denied, or idealized. She awakens what he has buried. And the deeper she embodies mystery, the more he loses his ground. For him, she is both a drug and a mirror. A drug because he cannot stop returning. A mirror because she exposes his shadows without saying a word. This is the paradox. The more she withholds performance, the more his obsession grows. He does not know why her silence cuts deeper than her words, why her gaze unsettles him more than her touch, why her detachment burns hotter than any declaration of love. Yet you, listening now, must understand this. What drives a man into compulsion is not her giving, but her restraint. It is not the excess of affection, but the sparseness of her offering. The feminine mystery lies in the spaces she leaves unfilled, in the unanswered questions she never rushes to resolve. Think of it this way. When everything is explained, desire dies. The masculine psyche thrives on conquest, on knowing, on control. But the woman who does not hand herself over as an open book, who refuses to be consumed by the small hunger of ego, unsettles this rhythm. She throws his entire order into disarray. He feels both weakened and electrified. And in that tension, between the craving for mastery and the inability to master, his addiction is born. Some women embody this naturally. They are not playing games. They are simply rooted in themselves, aware that their worth is not negotiated in the marketplace of male approval. Their silence is not absence but presence, not weakness but power. It is a field that demands a man confront what he cannot control. Jung would say that such women unconsciously initiate men into shadow work, forcing them to face the wounded parts of themselves they'd rather project onto her. This is why obsession always tells us more about the man than about the woman. But let us be clear, the woman herself must walk carefully here. For mystery without grounding can collapse into manipulation, and addiction without awareness can turn into destruction. The true feminine magnetism is not about withholding out of fear, but radiating out of fullness. It is the difference between starving a man so he chases crumbs versus feeding herself so abundantly that her very presence overflows into mystery. The first enslaves her as much as it enslaves him. The second makes her untouchable. Notice what happens when she is centered, when she no longer orbits a man's attention. Suddenly, he finds himself orbiting her. He senses her energy is not negotiable, not fragile, not begging for rescue. Instead, it is sovereign, self-contained. And this is precisely what makes him restless, because it exposes the hollowness of his own ego. He cannot fix her. He cannot complete her. He cannot own her. And so, paradoxically, he longs for her all the more. Imagine a man returning again and again to the thought of a woman who never tried to impress him, who never bent herself into the shape of his desire. Why does he remember her more than the ones who gave him everything? Because his soul recognizes in her what his ego refuses, a glimpse of the eternal feminine, a reminder of his own unfinished self. She awakens in him not comfort, but confrontation. And in that confrontation, his longing becomes endless. For you, the listener, the question is not whether you should chase this dynamic, but whether you can recognize its essence in yourself. Can you embody mystery without manipulation, depth without demand, presence without performance? Can you allow your silence to speak louder than your explanations, your detachment to hold more gravity than your pursuit? Because the truth is this, the most dangerous feminine trait is not external beauty, but internal alignment. When a woman is at home in her own soul, she becomes irresistible, not because she feeds his ego, but because she denies it. And so we arrive at the first thread of mystery, the feminine power of absence. Not the absence of love, but the absence of need. A woman who is whole in herself does not chase, does not beg, does not bend. She embodies a silence that intoxicates, a restraint that unsettles, a presence that lingers. To the man, this becomes unbearable and irresistible at once. He feels her as an ache he cannot resolve, a hunger he cannot satisfy, and that is where his addiction begins. There is a silence that does not wound but awakens, a quiet so potent it echoes louder than a scream. When a woman learns to sit within this silence, when she does not rush to fill every void with words, approval, or validation, she embodies the very paradox that dismantles the masculine ego. For the man, this silence is unbearable. It confronts him with himself. Jung knew that obsession is rarely about the other. It is about the parts of the self that remain unmet, unseen, unresolved. And so, when her silence descends, he projects his inner chaos onto her, mistaking her composure for cruelty, her restraint for rejection. Yet beneath that projection lies the truth. He is not addicted to her voice, but to the mirror she holds. Imagine him pacing, restless, crafting stories in his mind. Why didn't she answer? Why didn't she explain? Why didn't she bend the way others have bent? The truth is that she withholds nothing but illusion. She refuses to play the role his ego demands. And because of this refusal, his mind turns her into a labyrinth, a mystery that cannot be solved. Addiction takes root not in abundance, but in scarcity, not in what is given, but in what is withheld. Every unanswered question deepens the wound, and every wound deepens the longing. But here lies the deeper secret. Her silence is not calculated. It is not a weapon forged to torment him. It is a natural expression of self-possession. The feminine in her does not rush because she is already full. She does not explain because she does not need to be understood to exist. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole unto oneself. A woman who walks this path does not chase external completion. She knows her soul is already intact. And this wholeness, paradoxically, makes her unforgettable. For the man, such wholeness feels dangerous. He is drawn to it the way a moth is drawn to flame. He cannot conquer what is already complete, cannot rescue what does not need saving, cannot possess what refuses to be owned. This is why he becomes addicted, because she offers him no role that would soothe his ego. Instead, she invites him, silently, relentlessly, into his own unfinished work. Her presence is not comfort, but initiation, and initiation always unsettles before it transforms. This is the second mysterious feminine trait that binds him: emotional detachment. Not coldness, not cruelty, but the refusal to be consumed by his storms. Men are used to women who absorb their chaos, who soothe their insecurities, who become extensions of their emotional wounds. But the woman who does not absorb, who does not contort herself into his therapy, disorients him completely. He expects her to break under his inconsistency. Instead, she remains unmoved. He tests her with silence, she answers with calm. He tests her with chaos, she answers with presence. And in this equilibrium, he discovers something terrifying. She is free. Detachment, in this sense, is not disinterest, but sovereignty. It is the ability to stand in love without losing the self, to give without dissolving, to remain present without collapsing. She can look into his storm without being swept away. And this, more than anything, enslaves his desire. For what is rarer, what is more intoxicating than a woman who cannot be broken? It is here that the masculine begins to unravel. He confuses detachment with rejection, yet he cannot walk away. He feels she is slipping through his grasp, yet she never ran. He fears she does not need him, yet he is magnetized by that very freedom. The paradox of addiction is this: the less she needs, the more he hungers. And so you must see clearly, this is not about manipulation. True detachment is not the performance of indifference. It is the lived reality of inner abundance. It is knowing that your soul is not diminished by absence, that your value does not rise and fall with the tides of male desire. When you embody this, you move differently. You stop explaining, stop pleading, stop shrinking. Your energy becomes rarer, sharper, unforgettable. And to the man, it is maddening. Jung wrote that what we deny in ourselves, we project onto others. The addicted man, clinging to her silence and her detachment, is not truly longing for her. He is longing for the part of himself he has yet to meet. He is drawn to her freedom because he lacks his own. He is enslaved by her self-possession because he has not yet possessed himself. And this is why she becomes both his torment and his teacher. The feminine mystery, then, is never about tactics. It is about being so deeply rooted in the self that a man cannot help but lose himself in her presence. He is not addicted to her body or her words. He is addicted to the abyss she reveals in him, the mirror that shows him what he has buried. And until he confronts that abyss, he will always return. There is a gaze some women carry, not the flirtatious glance that seeks approval, but the unblinking, unhurried gaze that seems to see through a man rather than at him. This gaze is not performance, it is perception. It unsettles him because it does not mirror his ego, it reflects his essence. He feels exposed, as though every mask he has carefully constructed has fallen away in her presence. This is the third mysterious feminine trait, the capacity to witness without collapsing. To witness is not the same as to flatter. Many women, taught to soothe the male psyche, soften their eyes, dim their light, pretend not to notice the fractures in a man's soul. But the woman who simply sees, without judgment and without surrender, awakens something unbearable in him. She becomes the mirror he cannot escape. In her gaze, his ego is stripped and his shadow stares back at him. He does not know whether to run from her or kneel before her. And this ambivalence, this torment, is the seed of his addiction. The ancient Stoics warned of the danger of illusion, that the things we desire most are often the very things that enslave us. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not external things that trouble us, but our judgments about them." In the same way, the man who cannot release the memory of a woman's gaze is not bound to her body, but to the judgment he carries of himself reflected in her eyes. She did not speak it, yet he felt it. She did not accuse, yet he trembled. For what could be more destabilizing than a woman who sees you not for what you pretend to be, but for what you are? And here is where her power grows. Because she does not cling to his performance, she does not indulge his excuses, she does not feed his illusions. She allows him to sit with the discomfort of being seen. And because she does not rescue him from that discomfort, he begins to associate her with truth. Dangerous, intoxicating truth. She becomes, in his psyche, the forbidden oracle, the priestess who knows him better than he dares to know himself. And so, even in absence, he cannot escape her. For you, the listener, this is where the essence of feminine power must be carefully understood. To see without collapsing means you do not carry his wounds as your burden. You do not rush to fix, to soothe, to heal. You allow him to wrestle with his shadows while you remain intact. This is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is knowing that your role is not to dissolve into his storms, but to remain as the still mirror in which his storms reflect. And yet this stillness is precisely what he cannot release. He feels both shamed and purified by it. Like a man returning to the site of his first wound, he returns in thought to her gaze. He hates it, and he craves it. It is both poison and medicine. Addiction always carries this paradox. What we cannot bear to hold, we cannot bear to lose. The feminine who holds this power does not chase, does not argue, does not demand recognition. Her very existence unsettles. She need not raise her voice. Her silence is her thunder. Her gaze is her lightning. Men may laugh, dismiss, even reject her, but they will not forget. For memory does not cling to comfort. Memory clings to rupture, and the woman who sees without fear leaves a rupture in every man she meets. But beware. To wield such presence requires inner work. It requires facing one's own shadows so that the act of seeing another does not collapse into projection or judgment. Jung warned that we can only meet others to the depth we have met ourselves. A woman who has not confronted her own shadows cannot truly witness a man. She will only see reflections of her unhealed wounds. But the woman who has done the work becomes untouchable. She sees him clearly, yet she is not shaken. She gazes, and he unravels. This is why some women are remembered forever. Not because they were the most beautiful, not because they were the most compliant, but because they carried within them the terrifying freedom of perception. They looked, and in that looking, they pierced the illusions a man clings to. He becomes addicted, not to her presence, but to the abyss she revealed inside him. And so the third thread of feminine mystery weaves into the others: silence, detachment, and perception. Together, they form a triad of power that dismantles the masculine ego. To him, she is both the drug and the withdrawal, both the fire and the ice. He cannot master her, and so he circles her endlessly. What he truly seeks is not her body, but the confrontation with himself she embodies. There is a quality more intoxicating than beauty, more disarming than seduction, more enduring than charm. It is the aura of a woman who walks with mystery, not the mystery of deception, but the mystery of depth. This is the fourth trait that pulls men into compulsion, the unfathomable richness of inner life. Most men are accustomed to women whose worlds revolve around them. Their egos are fed by being the center, the sun around which another orbits. But when a man encounters a woman who is her own cosmos, whose silence hides oceans of thought, whose solitude is not emptiness but sanctuary, he is undone. He senses she carries secrets that are not meant for him, depths he cannot chart, worlds he cannot conquer. And this realization destabilizes him, for conquest has always been his nature. What he cannot conquer, he obsesses over. Jung understood that mystery awakens projection. The less a man knows, the more his unconscious fills the gaps. He turns her into symbol, archetype, goddess, demon. He cannot rest with uncertainty, so he fabricates narratives. And in this spinning, he grows addicted, not to the woman as she is, but to the fantasy he has built upon her silence. She becomes to him not a person, but a portal, a threshold into the unknown. And once the psyche tastes the unknown, it cannot easily let go. This is why mystery is dangerous. It feeds the imagination in ways reality never can. He becomes restless, obsessed, even tormented, because she is never fully his. He cannot pin her down, cannot predict her, cannot place her neatly into the box of his control. Her very being defies his categories, and in that defiance, she awakens his hunger. For you listening now, the key is not to pretend mystery, but to embody it. Pretending mystery is performance, a fragile mask that crumbles under pressure. Embodying mystery is simply living fully in your own inner world. It is the poetry you read when no one watches, the prayers you whisper in solitude, the passions you cultivate that have nothing to do with him. It is the refusal to flatten yourself into transparency for the comfort of another. The woman who embodies mystery does not withhold, she simply cannot be contained. Men sense this instinctively. They feel that even when she offers love, she is never emptied. Even in intimacy, she remains whole. And this wholeness is unbearable to the masculine ego that longs to possess. He wants to believe she exists only for him, that her identity is bound to his validation. But when she carries a life beyond him, he feels both powerless and obsessed. Powerless because he cannot own her. Obsessed because he cannot release the grip of longing for what he cannot master. Seneca once wrote, "He who is greedy is always in want." The greedy man who encounters a mysterious woman will always hunger, never rest. For the more he tries to grasp her, the more she slips through his fingers. She teaches him, without words, that desire is endless when it seeks possession. His addiction to her is, in truth, his addiction to the unattainable. And she becomes the face of that unattainability. But notice, her power lies not in manipulation. She does not need to hide, to trick, to perform riddles. Her mystery comes from alignment. She is not living for his gaze. She is living for the sacred dialogue between herself and her soul. A woman like this becomes luminous, not because she demands attention, but because she glows from within. And men, unable to understand the source of that glow, become enslaved by it. He may call her confusing, complicated, impossible. He may even resent her, but resentment is still attachment. Hate is still obsession. The opposite of addiction is not hate, it is indifference. And indifference is impossible when faced with true feminine mystery. She haunts him not because she tried to haunt him, but because she revealed, by simply being, how shallow his control truly is. Thus, the fourth feminine trait that pulls men into addiction is this sacred unfathomability. It is the way she embodies both closeness and distance, presence and absence, intimacy and autonomy. She is never one-dimensional. She cannot be consumed. And in a world obsessed with consumption, this makes her unforgettable. The danger for her is forgetting this truth, forgetting that her mystery does not need to be diluted for the comfort of others. The temptation is always to simplify, to explain, to become palatable. But the woman who protects her depths protects her power. And the man who tastes even a fragment of those depths will find himself circling endlessly, unable to release the ghost of her presence. And now we arrive at the final thread, the most perilous and magnetic of all, the trait that binds together silence, detachment, perception, and mystery into a force almost unbearable to the masculine psyche. It is the woman's ability to embody paradox, to be soft yet unyielding, tender yet untouchable, intimate yet sovereign. This is the fifth feminine trait, and it is the one that enslaves him most completely, because it cannot be solved. The masculine mind craves resolution. It longs for clarity, for answers, for a map that explains the terrain. But when a woman lives as paradox, she defies every attempt at categorization. She is nurturing yet independent, compassionate yet detached, loving yet self-contained. He reaches for one aspect of her and finds its opposite. He cannot place her into the binary of saint or temptress, savior or destroyer, lover or enemy. She embodies both, and this duality disarms him, for it speaks directly to his unconscious, the place where all contradictions live. Jung wrote that the anima, the inner feminine in a man's psyche, carries both the light of inspiration and the darkness of destruction. She is muse and witch, angel and abyss. And when a man meets a woman who embodies this paradox outwardly, his anima erupts. He feels both drawn and terrified, both elevated and shattered. Addiction takes hold precisely because she offers him no simple resolution. She is not the safe comfort of predictability, but the dangerous intoxication of contradiction. Imagine his torment. She can look at him with softness that makes him feel invincible, and in the next breath, turn away with detachment that makes him feel invisible. She can nurture his spirit with her presence, yet refuse to collapse into dependency. She can surrender in love, yet never surrender her soul. Every attempt to pin her down fails because she is always more than he expected, more than he can contain, and this more is what he cannot release. For you, listening, the essence of feminine paradox is not performance, but integration. It is the result of shadow work, of facing the parts of yourself that society taught you to deny. When you reclaim your softness without shame, your strength without apology, your need for love without fear, your independence without pride, you become whole. And wholeness always appears paradoxical to the fragmented. To the man still trapped in ego, you seem contradictory. To yourself, you feel aligned. This is why he becomes addicted, because you reflect back to him a vision of wholeness he has not yet achieved. He sees in you the integration of opposites, the very integration his soul craves. And instead of doing his own work to find it within, he clings to you, mistaking your presence for his cure. Addiction always thrives in this confusion, the belief that another can complete what only the self can reconcile. But here is the truth you must never forget. His addiction is not your responsibility. You are not his savior, not his completion, not his medicine. You are a mirror. His longing is his own soul calling him to confront his shadows, to embrace his anima, to become whole. If he mistakes you for the source of his wholeness, he will suffer. If you mistake his longing for proof of your worth, you will suffer. The only path forward is detachment, to stand in your paradox without bending to his projections. This is the culmination of feminine power, not the power to ensnare, but the power to remain free even in the face of obsession. To know that you do not need his hunger to confirm your depth, his longing to prove your value, his addiction to validate your existence. You are already whole. His obsession is merely testimony to what you reflect in him. And so, when a woman learns to embody silence, detachment, perception, mystery, and paradox, she no longer plays by the rules of the ego. She becomes something far more dangerous, a mirror of truth. Men will remember her not because she begged, not because she chased, not because she bent, but because she revealed. And revelation, once tasted, cannot be forgotten. The woman who knows this does not chase. She does not beg. She does not bend her worth to fit into the fragile vessel of male validation. She walks as paradox, sovereign and soft, radiant and reserved, a storm and a sanctuary in one. She does not lure men into addiction intentionally. She simply exists, and in existing, she awakens what they have not yet met within themselves. And so it ends here. The mystery, the compulsion, the haunting power of the feminine that Jung devoted his life to unraveling. Addiction is never truly about her. It is about the shadow she awakens, the anima she embodies, the wholeness he has not yet claimed. She walks away free, carrying nothing but herself. And he, left in her absence, learns that the only cure for his addiction is to turn inward. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.